Kia ora, bula, kia rana, talofa, maloelele, and welcome to Tupalahi and a Piece and Easy Pod. My name's Glenn Murphy, and I'm here in Aotearoa on Waiheke Island. And Dave, I've been a year back in New Zealand this week after being away for 22 years, so a big celebration. But anyway, great to be with you for another week, my friend.
Oh, fantastic, Glenn. Wananavu, and congratulations to all of our listeners. Whakalofa lahi atu, talofani, maloelele, kia ora. David Dewar here. I'm dialing in from Rarotonga in Cook Islands, but as you will know if you've been listening to the show as we've been going, Glenn and I have been working together for the past 6 years in the Pacific. I was previously based in Fiji and working with New Zealand, Australian and Pacific businesses around the region to help them succeed and understand how this dynamic region operates. And it's fantastic to be doing it so again through this weekly podcast.
And in this episode, we're going to feature a Talanoa with Vasiti Soko. Dave, do you want to explain a little bit about that? Because you've set this up and I have not met Vasiti before, so I'm looking forward to it immensely.
Vasiti's name and actually face will be known to many of those listeners or viewers who are dialing in from Fiji, because for many years she was the director of the National Disaster Management Office, or NDMO. And that is a very, very important part of the Fiji government, and especially so during a cyclone or other natural disaster, because this is, of course, the emergency management, or as it says, National Disaster Management Office, that coordinates government activity in the event of a cyclone, which is the most common natural disaster that they experience. But not only that, many, many other things that can befall a government and a population. And of course, when I first met Vasiti, it was in 2020, and I had just arrived in Fiji during that time, and they were experiencing
nothing going on.
As was the rest of the world, they were experiencing a very different kind of disaster and crisis in the form of COVID-19. But not only that, I think in the space of 2 or 3 months, they had at least 2 Category 5s and 1 Category 4 cyclone that came through Fiji. So Vasiti was a very busy and very prominent person during that time. She's now moved on to another role at your old university, Glenn. So she's dialing in from San Francisco today.
Well, we look forward to talking to Vasiti shortly. But Dave, how was your week?
Yeah, it's I've got to say, it's getting quite cold this week. All of the Rarotongans and people that have lived here for long enough are kind of walking around in hoodies, because it's been the temperatures have dropped down into probably the high teens, if not the early 20s. And for those of us living out in the region, that is of course bitterly cold.
Wow, well I didn't know that it got that cold in Rarotonga. During the week, I had the privilege of attending the launch of the Pacific Value for Investment model, or P-VIM to its friends. Was a launch of what is really a new way of trying to evaluate the effectiveness of investment into the Pacifica community, and underpinned by an understanding of the economics of an investment, and so the requirement for an economic return, but also trying to balance that out with looking at the community and what are the relationships that are generated from a particular program, what are the benefits to a community. So really interesting piece of work, some wonderful people involved in it. Seemed like everybody I met had a doctorate that was in the room, so it was
So you were in good company.
Well, yeah, it was a bit overwhelming at times, but incredible people. It was a really fun night for something that sounds completely dry. It was actually hugely entertaining, and the whole thing was done with tremendous Pacific humour.
Yeah, you forwarded me the flyer. I was quite interested to see it, because looking at the various names involved, and you had representatives from both the private sector in the form of organisations like the Pacific Business Trust, but also the Treasury.
Yeah.
So very much the central government level. So I guess I'd be just interested to know what's the purpose of the framework? Is it there to guide government investment, or is it there to guide potential commercial investments in New Zealand or in the region as well?
Look, Dave, my understanding is it's more around the government investment, but what I'd love to do is actually get a couple of the people who were behind the whole initiative onto the show at some point, because personally I would love to learn more about it. I think the the event itself this week was more of a launch kind of party rather than diving into the detail of how it works and what it's all about. I'd love to get somebody like Dr. Odette Frost and perhaps Dr. Lana Parisi, who some of the key architects behind it, onto the show at some point to really talk us through it.
Yeah, absolutely. This week was quite a big week, I guess, for big economic announcements. We are getting into kind of budget season, and when governments are releasing all of their national budgets and plans, and so Samoa this week has released its national development plan, and some of the big news there has been around increase in the minimum wage. But also supports for manufacturers and exporters as well.
And all that, of course, in the context of the current fuel problems, and that's probably a great segue into our Talanoa with Vasiti.
Vasiti and I were both on another Talanoa yesterday with the Fiji Business Disaster Resilience Council, business representatives from the Fiji Commerce and Employers Federation, dialing in to really listen to some of the analysis, but also the advice that people like Vasiti provide to businesses about their own continuity plans and thinking about the fuel price rise, a bit like you would think about a cyclone. It's still a crisis, even though it's not an immediate and quick-moving one. It's a slow-moving, chronic one, but still you can take some interesting and similar precautions as you might in the event of a cyclone or a natural disaster. So, yeah, really excited about the Talanoa with Vasiti today, and let's get into that. We are delighted to be joined today by Vasiti Soko. Vasiti is a name and a face that will be known to, well, many of our viewers or listeners who will be dialing in from Fiji, certainly. She was the first female director of the National Disaster Management Office, NDMO, in Fiji, and has since gone on to a range of other roles. She is dialing in today from San Francisco at UC Berkeley, where she holds a role helping that organization and people in the US deal with very different natural disasters. Vasiti, bula vinaka, and welcome to Tupalangi in a Pisanisi pod.
Bula David, bula Glen. It's good to be here.
Yeah, bula Vasiti, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Today has been a day where both Vasiti and I have gone to check up ourselves, and we've just returned from the dentist. So I think we're both sounding pretty good for that for a period of time. When Fiji was experiencing cyclone after cyclone, Vasiti's face was plastered across every TV screen on a daily basis. And I have an embarrassing admission to share. The first time I met Vasiti, I think it sounded like every single person in Fiji but one had seen her daily media releases telling people what to do in the event of the cyclone. And so there was me as a freshly arrived New Zealand official going up to this lovely lady at a New Zealand embassy function and asking her who she was and what she did. And every single person's face around the room just opened in shock, saying, "How on earth have you not seen Vasiti and taken heed of all of her warnings?" So Vasiti, once again, my apologies for that, but I now know you to be the true master of disaster in Fiji and across the region.
Oh, no, that's my pleasure. I've always held you accountable for that. And I think you made up for that in yesterday when you facilitated the FPDRC webinar. So you're clamping up to the level of forgiven, not fully forgiven yet, but you're coming there. That's for everyone's information. If you see my face slightly not formed the way it should be, it's because I'm still numb from the
Vasiti and I were together yesterday on another webinar hosted by the Fiji Business Disaster Resilience Council, and it was fantastic actually to have that opportunity to moderate that discussion. And the webinar was an interesting one because it was talking about the crisis of the moment, which is of course the fuel price crisis. I'm always happy to keep working my way into your good books, Vasiti, with other such appearances.
Absolutely.
I wonder if we could maybe just walk it back slightly and get you to kind of start off a little bit with the Vasiti Soko story. How did you come to be that first female director of NDMO? How have you come to be doing this work in UC Berkeley, and what are you up to these days?
Thank you, David. I've always had this thing with positively looking at things that are negative connotated in a way that at that time when I did my undergrad, and I was an accounting and economics major, and I just happened to walk past a lecture room at the University of South Pacific, and I saw that the room was full of male. And so I went to the administration block and I went and asked, I was like, what classroom is that? What class is that? It's like, oh, that's land management. I'm like, why is there no female? That was the turning point of me changing my degree as well. I changed my degree from accounting and economics to land management that needed a bit of female touch. Geospatial science was very new in Fiji back then. It was not even a degree, it was only a diploma. And I was really mesmerized on how technology was used to forecast all these predictions about flooding and about cyclone. So I graduated in 2006, April, with my diploma in geographical information system. And then December of the same year, I graduated with my degree. Did my master's in Australia. And then I specialized again in geospatial science. We did not have a person in Fiji who was a geodesist. And so I was very bad in maths. Let me just put that to the record. Never liked maths.
You know, you were doing accounting and economics, and then you went into land management, and you hate maths.
And I hate maths. But I decided to take a geodesy thesis because I knew there was no geodesist in Fiji, which was 110% maths because we were calculating the differential rate between GPS leaving, atmosphere and then hitting the earth, and it bounces back, and all the different types of atmosphere and the different layers that we have. So that was hardcore maths. But what excited me more was going back home with the knowledge that no one else at home had at that time, which was geodesists. I guess for me, it's the reason I highlighted that was all this was the energy that was building up to the director post. I did some work with the University of South Pacific. While I was there, I was offered the position for NDMO director. And so the rumor started going that the position was offered to somebody not within the civil servant. And so I was still in Canberra and I started getting feedbacks like, oh, you're going to have a hard time. The staffs don't like you. And so while I was still in Canberra and getting all these feedbacks, and at the same time, I was also being offered a position with the Minister of Defense. And then I sat on these two posts. I'm like, man, if I go to defense, I establish something very new. I don't have to worry about NDMO. So I actually, prayed about this for a week. I kid you both not. Every time I prayed, like it will be a prayer before I sleep, my head was telling me defense because it was straightforward, no hustle and bustle. NDMO was a choice at heart because I knew it was for the people. I knew a lot of issues that were coming up and I knew I could make that difference. And so at that juncture, the head was telling me, take the easy road, defense. The heart was telling me, take the hard road, make a difference. And then the last night, before I slept, I said, Lord, this is it. I'm not taking NDMO. I slept that night. I kid you not, David. I woke up in the morning. You know what I dreamt of? I dreamt of the Bible story of Jonah inside the whale and how the whale took him back to exactly where God had told him to go and then threw him out there. So when I woke up, that was the dream that I had. And I burst out laughing. I said, you know what? I gave up. I give in. I signed the position. I said, Lord, if this is for me, you will take me through it. And he's never disappointed me.
Fantastic story. And how are you feeling about maths these days, Vasiti?
With AI, it's like, yeah. It's easy.
Indeed. Very good.
So I guess the question is, what did you learn during that NDMO role?
From the very beginning, it was building trust with the staff. I understand where they were coming from. They had somebody totally new. If there's anything I want people to remember me with NDMO is number of staffs that were actually, gone overseas to go to further their studies, the number of promotion that happened with them, the number of policies that were approved. So it was more people-centered. If you look at the time spent, you spend more time at work than at home. Office is like your second home. And so I did not create the environment like an office per se. It was created like a home. Like if you would be stressed from home, when you come to the office, there's laughter. That gave them comfort to actually do that work successfully because the environment was set for them to succeed. I also knew that with NDMO, our process was very different because not only were we there from 4 to 5, we were also there during long hours in a response effort. So the staff could not have that mindset of this is a culture of work where we need to concentrate on work and things like that. When you create an environment where people feel like home, you get to achieve more as a team.
And if you look back at that time, Vasiti, and you kind of walked into a team that were very unsure about you coming in and you had to build that trust, how long do you think it took you to do that? And then secondly, if there's any particular advice that you would give to anybody moving into a new leadership role or stepping up into a team they're unsure about?
How long? I would say, it's different staff have different length of time. So it depends on the personality that they have, right? You can't change a person, okay? But you can change the relationship you have with that person. So with me, when I first started, that was my first mistake. I wanted to change the person. So instead of changing the person, you change your relationship with the person. Simple things like walking up and saying, good morning, or acknowledging them in the meetings of the work that they're doing, letting them lead conversations or sending them for further trainings, etc., etc. Those small efforts build that relationship that would later on allow comfortable conversations with staff. So my disaster framework kicked in very quickly. Assess the situation, prepare for the situation. When we prepare, it simply means how do I have a conversation? So assess, prepare, and then response. Response is when you know all the triggers, but at the same time, because you've been assessing, you've been preparing, when that particular issue happen or the trigger happen, you know how to solve it because you've already assessed, you've already prepared yourself for when it happens. And then the last is recovery. Recovery is if it does work, well and good. If it doesn't, okay, what's the lesson learned for me and how can I further rebuild that relationship with the staff?
I love that, Vasiti, that you can't change the person, but you can change the relationship is fantastic advice. And it sort of took me back to when I was Dave's boss and I was trying to change him and it just wouldn't work. And
Forget about it.
No, I wish I'd had your wisdom, 5 years ago.
He needed a much stronger crisis management framework to deal with everything that I was throwing at him, Vasiti. I love that, how you apply a crisis management framework. And I'm interested in that because, that's kind of a bit like the role of the NDMO as well, right? You're trying to shape behavior at a national level amongst businesses. So I wonder, for those of our listeners who might not be aware of the role that the NDMO plays in the Fijian system, what is it that it does? How does the NDMO sort of shape behavior and influence the system?
Yeah. Well, for NDMO Fiji, the office is legislated by the law to actually coordinate. Yeah. And so the office in itself is trained and is an expert in coordinating whole of government approach. And after every disaster, the NDMO, or now called NDRMO, they conduct what we call an after action review. It's a tool where we analyze what went well, what didn't go well, what can be improved. So Fiji Business Disaster Resilience Council was actually birthed out of TC Winston, if I'm correct. Fiji needed to develop its own business council to actually support the businesses during disasters, but also through them support government. And so Fiji Business Disaster Resilience Council was also formed. And then in addition to that, the Fiji cluster system was also formed. So for example, the Ministry of Health heads up the health cluster. And then the Ministry of Women, the social protection cluster, really in their own space, they chair their own unit. So the idea behind it is instead of everybody running to NDMO, they align themselves to one of the clusters. So if they're doing WASH, they don't have to come to NDMO. They just go directly to the health cluster, which is where WASH sits under. So the Fiji Business Disaster Resilience Council also became part of that. And even when they stood up as a council, I think there wasn't much conversations or coordination happening until COVID-19. This is when we really tested FBDRC. And so using the Fiji Business Disaster Resilience Council to actually mobilize the business team or actually supply small things like sanitizer. And we know sanitizer was was a rock star during COVID-19, right? Like everybody wanted sanitizers. So we have businesses that were developing sanitizers overnight. But, if there's any big lesson learned from that, it's the fact that there's resources and there's relationship that needs to be built before an event happens. Relationship that succeeds during a crisis is the one that's built before crisis. With that lesson learned, they are now registered and mentioned in the new Disaster Act for Fiji, the recognition of FPDRC into the disaster framework for Fiji.
I love that. So I guess what you're saying is that the role of the NDMO or NDRMO is not to single-handedly solve every problem, but it's to be that kind of orchestra conductor, isn't it? To
Yes.
help make sure that all of the different groupings and communities, including the business community, are able to play that coordinated role in a response.
Yeah. You saw it with the fuel crisis. There is the NDMO that actually brought together whole of government, whole of society to actually discuss about how this fuel crisis will impact Fiji. That's the strength that the NDMO has. The other thing that, others should also be notable about is some of our partners, they just need NDMO to announce a declaration for them to trigger finance that's released to government. So a lot of that relationship building happens and is already embedded within NDMOs.
And I liked the other parallel that you drew during yesterday's webinar about the fuel price crisis, because the point that I recall you making was that it's not just a price shock, it's actually an operational disruption.
Absolutely.
And to think about it like that, you do bring in the parallels to a cyclone or to a COVID-19. That means that they can actually start planning for it in similar ways. What are some of the things that businesses may often overlook or should really be focusing on when they think about how to prepare themselves for a current or future operational disruption?
A business continuity plan. Yes, we do have response plan, but the response plan is to deal with how we can respond to a disaster. But a business continuity plan tells the businesses what happens when it happens. And then when it happens, what do you do? Disaster and resilience has grown so much now in terms of definition that who would have thought fuel crisis would be a disaster, right? We got to move away from the thinking cap that disaster is only natural. It is also man-made. So if businesses were to do anything, I would say, really focusing on your business continuity plan. If you want to have access to this business continuity plan, I've made a downloadable template on my website. I have a website called Pacific Virgil. So in Pacific Virgil, you'll find one of the page called Prepared. You click on Prepared, you'll have access to a BCP template that business can easily just go in there, answer a few questions, click download.
Yeah, that sounds like a great resource, thinking about businesses, not just within themselves, but actually as part of a system, right? Say to the businesses, check your own business continuity plan and then call all of your suppliers and ask them about theirs. What are they going to do to keep supplying you with the key inputs that you need to keep your own business going?
I was having this conversation earlier with someone. He looked at me and said, "Oh, why are you still focusing, why are you still investing some of your energy across the Pacific?" And I'm like, because one, I'm a Fijian. Number two, I'm very patriotic about the Pacific. And number three, I believe God placed me here for a reason, to learn what's happening here and bring it back home. So for me, one of the things that stood out for me when I started at UC Berkeley was business continuity and how important it is. Even for emergency management, we stop at response because that's what the disaster management cycle is. So business continuity is almost response to early recovery. It's also making sure that there is a plan in place when that happens. And the only time you can do that is before it happens. I think it's not that common in Fiji or maybe across the Pacific. I may be even wrong if I say this, but I see that that's one that lacks. We stop at response. How do we better respond? But it's not that. It's how do you ensure that business continue after this?
Yeah, fantastic advice.
Such a great point. And we're talking about, the importance of business continuity planning at the individual enterprise level. We have many listeners sort of in the infrastructure and engineering and construction sectors who I think would be very focused on sort of supply chain continuity and things like that. But
Absolutely.
I guess thinking about those types of businesses in New Zealand and Australia and the relationship that they have to the Pacific and to Fiji, and many of them would often hear about a cyclone bearing down 2 or 3 days out, 72 hours notice, and that was when they would decide to get in touch to say, how can we help? Firstly, maybe stop emailing right now because everyone's in crisis mode. What would your advice be for businesses like those ones? We're in June right now. Cyclone season usually kicks into gear at about sort of October, November. What are some of the things that they can do to help maybe build some of the capacity in the region?
The Pacific works through relationship building, right? For businesses to know when to supply those things to Fiji during crisis, they got to know who first are they supplying you to, right? So you have to build that relationship with those that are already on the ground. So if a business, if they're interested in sending timber, connect with somebody in Fiji or connect with somebody in Solomon Islands or somewhere across the Pacific that has, that does or sells the same thing or works in the same space, because it is a need during crisis. I also have a Pacific AI talent recruit. And at the moment, we are recruiting a lot of experts, and this is in the disaster and climate change space. Now, Pacific Recruit, through the use of technology and AI, of course, we are able to actually scout the region, look for those that actually qualify. Within a matter of 5 minutes, the employee's dashboard is updated and whether that particular applicant meets the requirement or not. It's something easily that can also work in the disaster space, where we can have businesses register themselves. In an event of a disaster, they can raise their issues. Businesses from New Zealand or Australia, from or any other country, I mean, even our own families overseas, right? They want to help. So we are hoping that once we complete the stage where we are currently registering the expert channel, we already have that platform available now for construction workers, but we will, the fourth or fifth stage down the line from Pacific Talent is actually having a niche specifically for disaster. So work through those networks to know what is needed. And that has to happen before a crisis happens.
One of the things that that you mentioned that I think is really worth emphasizing is just that that reality that from a Fiji or a Pacific government perspective, the first thing that they're going to do is look to the local economy to be able to deliver the resources that they need in the immediate aftermath. And so, yes, sometimes there'll be stuff that's not available locally and they'll go internationally for that. So one of the bits of advice that we used to give out to New Zealand and Australian businesses was actually the best way that you can get stuff quickly into an affected area would be through a pre-existing relationship that you might have with local suppliers.
Yeah,
Hey,
absolutely.
Vasiti, we've heard about your amazing kind of academic career and your incredible proficiency at maths in terms of creating formulas on plate. But it also sounds like you've got quite an entrepreneurial bent to what you're doing when you're talking about some of the businesses and websites.
Thank you, Glenn. So I have a consultancy company, as I said earlier. It's called VPAC Consultancy. We do climate change and disaster work. The beauty about being here and still having that connection at home is that we're also able to bring some of the experts that we have here to upskill our professionals at home. The third business that I also now have is called Fiji Hub. Fiji Hub is actually aimed for backpackers, aim
Okay.
for homestayers, those small groups that provides tours to the waterfall or tours to sunset, etc., etc. But they're so small that one, they don't have a website. Two, they don't have a proper communication tool to ensure that they advertise and that they get the booking done directly. So the Fiji Hub not only promotes them, it also connects them.
So, look, we're coming to the end of our Talanoa now. I guess if we could leave with one final thought, if you had one sort of message out there for whether it's Pacific businesses or for New Zealand or Australian businesses about how they can best prepare for what comes next or for an increasingly uncertain world, what would it be?
Yeah, I think for me it would be when dealing with the Pacific, do things wholeheartedly from the heart. When I developed the two projects, the Fiji Hub and Pacific AI Talent, while I was going through my training, people were like, why are you going back to the Pacific? Do a project that is solving millionaires' problem. That's where you get the money, right? And I thought about it and I'm like, yes, that's where you get the easy money, but I don't know whether my heart will be at peace. And I knew that this was a problem. I knew that there was a group of people that was so skillful that just doesn't have a platform for them to showcase that. And for me, it was the satisfaction of doing something that makes a difference to someone versus developing something that would make a millionaire happy.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today for this Talanoa. I've learned a lot from just listening to you, and even just simple things like thinking about the difference between response and business continuity planning.
Oh, thank you very much from me as well, Vasiti. It's always a pleasure. I'm so glad that for the other people that might have been living under a rock and not already knowing who you were, that they can now have more of an understanding of the master of disaster, Vasiti Soko. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on the show with us. So once again, vinaka vakalevu, and I'm sure we will hear more from Vasiti Soko in the future.
Well, Dave, what a great Talanoa again. What an incredible woman, and so accomplished across a range of activity areas. I guess what I took into that is how much she runs into challenges, which I suppose is great in the kind of work that she's doing, but also how she does things wholeheartedly and does them from the heart as well, which, again, I guess a great quality for somebody who's looking after disaster recovery and responses. I think, some of the other things that I took out of it, and I kind of learnt quite a lot, but she learns all the time as well. And I was really fascinated in how she learnt as she went into that first situation with the disaster management office and looking at how she ran a team. And that quote she came up with, I can't change a person, but you can change a relationship. I think that's great advice for any leader, really. I know there's many times over my career where I thought, geez, if I could just change that person to think like this. And either you completely fail or it just takes years. And so I think...
And I'm living proof that you can't.
Exactly. I failed miserably. But I think also... listening to her talking about her disaster management framework of assess, prepare, respond, recover, and how she kind of applies that not just to her disaster work, but actually to the way that she thinks about leadership and to other kind of challenges that she comes across, I thought was great learning as well. And then the importance of being prepared was a big one, right? And I know that sounds easy, and it's actually quite hard to do in practice to carve out the time to think about what you've got to be prepared for a start, let alone to prepare for it. But the quote that I took out in terms of a relationship that lasts through a crisis is one that was established before the crisis. So I thought that was a really good way of looking at it too, particularly with the points that you were making around when disasters happen, you kind of all of a sudden get these people out of great heart and great nature wanting to help and wanting to respond, but it becomes very difficult in the eye of a crisis to find ways to have that help actually be useful unless it's been prepared and the relationships have been set beforehand. The final kind of thing I'd take out of what she was saying was made me really think about the difference between response to a crisis and the importance of business continuity planning. And, they're kind of related, but they are actually very different things. And the need for even small businesses to really think about what is their business continuity plan and how are they going to be part of a bigger ecosystem. And, you were on that webinar last week that I guess was really particularly related to the fuel crisis, but kind of thinking about how those businesses work together through the crisis as well. So, a lot of great learning, and then sort of into her own business stuff as well. Fascinating. She's got that kind of entrepreneurial bent as well to try and help through that means.
Yeah, 100%, Glenn. I think so much to take away from that. What I really liked about it is actually her framing of a crisis response as being, less about focusing on the actual crisis and more about focusing on the fact that it's an operational disruption. And that enables you to sort of think, well, okay, a cyclone is completely different to a sudden or a prolonged rise in fuel prices. But in actual fact, the outcomes and the things that you can do proactively as a business are the same. You assess your preparedness, you assess your business continuity plan. But also, I think, and this is is where I really think that she brings a useful perspective from her previous role as a national level coordinator, is that systems level thinking. It's all very well that you've got your own grab and go bag, you and your staff know how you're going to get through the next 3 or 4 days, but when it's about thinking about how your business continues to generate cash flow, how it continues to actually operate, what are your suppliers doing? What are your partners doing? What are all of the others in your network that are actually fundamental to the system that enables your business to keep going? What's their plan? And you've actually got a role and an ability to shape that and to work with your partners and your suppliers and others, and those you supply to keep that continuity going. And then if enough people do that, then at a macro level, the country itself can recover so much more quickly. And I think that's the insight that Vasiti brings from sitting atop that Fiji government system for so long and dealing with so many crises. I mean, my goodness, thinking about what she faced reasonably early in her tenure with COVID-19 and then 3 cyclones on top of that. I remember the response to TC Yaza, which was the first big one that Fiji got right at the end of 2020, and some of the things that they were having to think about, the deployment of support from overseas, the need for quarantine, the need for, remember social distancing, all of that good stuff. Vasiti was having to manage all of that, and the Fiji system was having to manage all of that. But that network structure that they had actually worked really well. And I think potentially we in New Zealand and Australia, Vasiti mentioned that developed countries do this a lot better and there's a lot more planning and all of that. But actually, I think there's quite a lot that we can take away from the experience of the Pacific, which deals with a lot of these sort of localized disasters a heck of a lot more regularly. Huge kudos to Vasiti.
And we will put those websites that she mentioned in the show notes as well for anybody who's keen to follow up, because it does sound like there's some great resources. I learned a lot from her and really appreciate you teeing that up. But what's in the week ahead, mate, as we move on?
Yeah, well, there's lots coming up and lots going on as ever. As we release this episode, the New Zealand Fiji Business Council will be visiting Fiji and having a joint conference with the Fiji New Zealand Business Council. So I think there's a delegation of around, as usual, sort of 30 to 40 businesses descending upon Suva on Monday and Tuesday, heading up to Bar on Wednesday, and then into Nandi for their joint conference on Thursday and Friday. And that's really around giving effect to the 2 prime ministers' ambition to grow that two-way trade between New Zealand and Fiji to over 2 billion New Zealand dollars.
I hope it is as valuable as it always has been for the group that's going this week, and I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be, Glenn. And thinking back to that point that Vasiti made, and indeed kind of, every guest on the show has made about a common theme in the Pacific being the importance of those partnerships and relationships that you establish. And, showing up regularly, consistently is a huge part of that. And so, this is a great opportunity to progress some of those discussions and connections. Huge kudos to the 2 presidents, Chandar Sen from New Zealand and also James Trussler at the Fiji end, and of course their executive committees who put a heck of a lot of effort into organising these events. On the subject of good fun, Glenn, as well, I have to tell you about something that I found quite amusing when I looked online yesterday.
Detail.
And I do encourage our audience to check this out. The Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka has been visiting Australia, and there was a meeting with the Australia Fiji Business Council under its esteemed new executive director, Leata Alaimwana. And I saw this excellent piece on social media where clearly over a lunch, Prime Minister Rabuka produced a harmonica, and he is a very accomplished musician, and he starts to play the tune to Waltzing Matilda, and everyone's nodding along politely, very politely, and then he gets to the chorus and he clearly indicates that he wants everyone to start singing. With characteristic Australian flair and enthusiasm, everyone around the table breaks into a chorus of Waltzing Matilda. So congratulations to all of those. It's a great insight into the sense of humour that PM Rabuka brings to these things, and also his musical talents. Michelle Wu has published that one on LinkedIn. The Prime Minister himself sat down with the council for a Talanoa about the opportunities to expand those Australia-Fiji business connections. I think also speaks volumes about the role and the relevance and the importance of the work that those councils do.
Yeah, Dave. And the other thing I just noted this week in that lineup up too, very related, I'm assuming, is the Fiji Airways inaugural flight direct to the Gold Coast.
A couple of big things in aviation this week. So that's one of them, and that's a very important one. Australia is, of course, the largest source of tourists for Fiji. Increasingly, that Queensland connection into Fiji is a very significant source of tourists. The other thing that I thought, in aviation news is I've seen that Solomon Airlines is reopening its own flights between Honiara and Port Moresby. And I think there's quite an interesting story to be had around just that increasing air connectivity in and out of Papua New Guinea. Now, I caught up the other week with Matthew Finlay, who's the chief executive of Solomon Airlines. He's a guest that we will certainly try to get on the show, relatively recent in the role, and looking at how he can make this relatively large airline by Pacific standards operate. He's got two big jets that he needs to keep occupied, and that's the main revenue earner as it is for any airline. So I think what that says about the potential of the PNG economy over the next little while is going to be quite interesting.
Well, those things are great, David. People who are doing business across the Pacific will know is one of the limitations is that ability to easily fly between different nations. And so I think the more that connectivity happens between islands, the easier it's going to be for people to do business across the Pacific rather than just with a Fiji or with the Cook Islands. I guess it's a difficult set of decisions to be making when there is a fuel crisis happening. But, if that wasn't there, I wonder if we'd be seeing even more going on at the moment.
I think you're absolutely right. Probably one of the biggest challenges around the Pacific is that critical need of air connectivity to get anywhere. There's a huge fixed cost in running airlines and in running large planes. And those costs in a larger market can be absorbed over a much larger volume of passengers. But in this part of the world, they have to be spread a lot more thinly. And so you have to think as an airline executive a lot more creatively around how you deploy those and how you remain profitable. And then, of course, you've got the fuel price, thrown on top of that. So I'm sure plenty of people in airlines around the region have been assessing their own business continuity plans and very much thinking about their own place in that system, because they really are at that pointy end of the fuel price impacts.
Well, that was a very clever loop back to our Talanoa with Vasiti, Dave. Well done. And on that note, that's been to Palangi and a PCDC pod for another week. And Dave, would you like to read us out?
I certainly would, Glenn. So thank you very much to everyone for listening to us today. And thank you once again to Vasiti for a very insightful presentation. It's wonderful to have you as a friend of the show. It's been awesome just having the feedback that we've had this week, some of the feedback that we've had around our previous guests on the show for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and really, really enjoying getting the comments in through social media, and of course to our email address 2.palagi, PALAGI @gmail.com. You can check us out on any of the podcast channels that you would habitually listen to. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course in full color on YouTube as well. Please tell your friends, please subscribe, please keep listening, and please get in touch to tell us about how you're finding it and any other things that you'd like us to cover or to profile. We really enjoy hearing from you. But in the meantime, this has been Tu Palangi in a Pisinisi pod for the week ending 14th of June.